It was 20 years ago today that World Championship Wrestling closed its doors forever, thus ending the Monday Night Wars. It's been 20 years and wrestling has never been the same since. On this special episode of That Wrestling Show, we're going to talk about WCW's demise 20 years ago to the day. Hello everybody, I'm Bill Yankovi and welcome to That Wrestling Show, the podcast where all pro wrestling matters, and especially this week, talking about World Championship Wrestling. Now, this episode, I could not do it alone. There's no way that you could do an entire episode based on really the end of World Championship Wrestling. So, a couple of wonderful people have volunteered their time to come onto the show, and let me introduce them at this time. First off, he's the host of, many shows, and now that's what I call podcasting, and the brand new show that's going to premiere this weekend, Bill Learns Kingdom Hearts. It's Jim Boy Star.
What's going on? Looking forward to talking some WCW today. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since this happened.
I know, it really is. Time flies. And speaking of time flying, our next guest, well, hasn't been on in quite a while because he's been a very busy man. He's gone to Galapagos Island and Lake Titicaca and all the other places. Let's welcome in Brian. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, everybody.
All right. Well, I think it's safe to say, before we really dive into this, the world has changed in 20 years since WCW closed. And we're going to get through some stuff here, but I want to start with a question, and I'm going to give this first question to Brian, because we will alternate back and forth. Who were some of the wrestlers that you enjoyed watching in WCW or your favorites? It could be at any point in time.
Oh, let's see. Well, I liked Sting. Mm-hmm. And as well as... Now, are we talking about... we were talking about the whole WCW history, right?
If you want to go that route, you can.
Okay. I also liked the Dangerous Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And Vader. And I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. It doesn't have to be a lot, you know.
I only watched WCW for a little bit, then I had a break from wrestling, and I kind of caught it off and on.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly like the earlier stuff kind of I gravitated to. Sad.
Oh, that's fine.
If you don't even mind me asking, Brian, what was like the earliest year? Like, what were the years that you followed it? Just so we have an idea.
1992 and 93, and that was pretty much it.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All
right. So for me, I kind of got in there probably around 93. And then, pretty much up until the dying days. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And I'm going to go with like some of my favorites that through the era of WCW. So like in the early parts, very early parts I started watching, I remember being a big Cactus Jack fan.
Right.
Which is, by the way, when I was thrilled to see the man as Cactus Jack at Madison Square Garden,
mm-hmm.
like when he debuted there. Anyway, and I also like Dustin Rhodes, The Natural. Going a little bit more in the NWO years, I did like the NWO. I also like Diamond Dallas Page. Then moving forward a little bit more from that, and I'm sure that I'm missing someone here or there.
Yeah.
When we're talking about towards the end, of course, you got to go with my boys 3 Count.
Yes, 3 Count.
And of course, there's a lot of people I didn't like, and I'm sure I'll hit on some of them during this episode.
Right. For me, I didn't get into it till about, I want to say like the end of 91 going into 92, probably 92 would be like the best answer. Um, Sting, obviously, because, I mean, you saw Sting and, you know, you're just amazed by his presence and the colors, you know, that it, as a kid, it really, you know, got to you. Um, as as I got older, or you know, as I went along, um, yeah, Dustin Rhodes is another one. He was so fun to watch. Dangerous Alliance, like Brian said. Um, and then toward, you know, when you get further along, um, you know, some of the cruiserweights were really good.
Mhm.
And then, you know, Goldberg.
Oh yeah, they were
Oh,
good.
there we go. Goldberg, you know, when he was hot, was a big deal, and then towards the end, um, trying to think, towards the end, you know, like Billy Kidman was fun to watch, and Booker T, and even Sid to a degree. Sid kind of fun to watch towards the end.
Until he broke his leg.
Yes. Well, even then he was still fun.
He was still
Right.
fun.
So, but no, those would be the people, you know, that I enjoyed watching. And something that I noticed, and I think it definitely shows in the three of us, because as far as I know, we're all within a close age range.
Right.
We did not mention Ric Flair on there, and I think that's
Oh right.
and I think that's because he was more of an 80s, you know, wrestler before WCW became WCW.
I think it's that,
Yeah.
and also because Ric Flair is, I'm not going to say he's very active, but he's been around still
Yeah.
more consistently, even if it's in a non-wrestling role.
Mm-hmm.
So if you combine all that together, I'm sure he probably had more years in WWE than he had in WCW.
Right.
Just like how Kurt Angle, I mean, technically had more years in Impact Wrestling than he did in WWE.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing.
I think that's part of it. Hey, can I tell you a real quick funny story about Sting?
Yeah.
So when I first got into WWE, right, and then all of a sudden one day as a kid, I'm flipping through channels with my father, and that's how I found WCW. And I say to said to my dad, like, oh, what's this? And he's like, oh, this is the other program. They have some good things on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then and Sting was on there, and I don't know why I'll never forget this, but he said to me, I was like, oh, I asked him, who's this guy? And he's like, oh, that's Sting. He's basically their Hogan. And I think because of that,
Yeah.
I never saw, like, quote unquote Surfer Sting,
Right.
even remotely as big as Crow Sting,
Mm-hmm.
because of that comment from my father.
That's actually good. That's a good story. I think you told me that, but I hadn't heard it in a long time.
Probably.
All right. That's actually a good segue to go to this question. And Jim, I'll start with you on this one. Did you ever go to a WCW show, either be a house show or TV?
Now, being in New Jersey and the New York area, and I was talking to a friend about this and getting ready for this show. It's very hard in this area to go to a WCW show in that time because, number one, WWE had a stronghold with Madison Square Garden in Manhattan. And at that time, we were talking about how in New Jersey, they had that weird thing going on that apparently Governor Christine Todd Whitman would eventually get rid of in 1997. So I think what that had to do with is they something about running TV, and I apologize for not knowing this ahead of time, but basically you can either go to Pennsylvania, which is way farther than I would go where I am in New Jersey, or you were going to the Nassau Coliseum.
Right.
which is incredible.
Right.
We went once for SummerSlam 2002, and me and my friends never went again because it was so far away.
Okay.
So the answer is no, but also it wasn't easily accessible to
Right.
us to visit.
Just because of where you live. Okay, that makes
Right.
sense. That makes sense.
Although
Yeah.
we did go to a February one in Nashville, I believe, February 1998.
Okay. Brian, same question. Did you ever go to a WCW event?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
I mostly read up on the internet what was going on during my hiatus from wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
and to also piggyback on your one question about watching. I did see some of it in the 1999 and such,
The Mayhem era?
the NWO stuff. But it was basically just as the NWO was about to implode.
Right.
Uh-huh.
That part.
Okay.
All right. I'm actually the only one here, and it's not bragging, that can say that went to a WCW show, and it was a Monday Nitro, and I can tell you how this happened, because we had a neighbor who used to work at the box office at the old Capitol Center, the U.S. Air Arena at the time, and they had Nitro that night. So the lady gave my dad 2 free tickets, vouchers. So my dad and I went to Nitro, and I didn't put it together until many years after. This was the Nitro before Bash at the Beach 96.
Okay.
Wow.
And what I remember about this was Hall and Nash coming down. They had, the bag of popcorn. They had their soda. And it was, such a big deal at the time that I remember I was talking with one of my sisters to get ready. And I just said out of the blue, I haven't seen Hulk Hogan in a while. I wonder how he's doing. Little did we know the next week he would shake up the entire wrestling world forever. And the other thing I do remember about that show is they had a dark match after Nitro, the TV was done. And it was Ric Flair versus Randy Savage with the guest referee. I'm really reaching out on the name here, so get ready to laugh. The guest referee for that match was Lou Thez.
What?
Really?
Yes.
He was still alive at that
Yeah.
time? Oh, yeah, he was.
So it's kind of, now I look back, I was like, oh my God, I actually saw Lou Thez in 1990s.
You saw Lou Thez live. I mean, that's certainly, I can tell you right now, that's probably never happening for me and for a lot of people seeing Lou Thez live, so you have that in your cap. Hell, back then it was probably tough for someone to say, I saw Lou Thez live.
Well,
Never mind 2021,
I know.
even 1996 or whatever.
And like I said, I never really thought of it. Oh, wait a minute. Was it Lou Thez or was it Bruno? I'm going to say it was Lou Thez.
I mean, I'm still sticking to my comment. It's not a lot of people would have seen Bruno live.
Right.
At that point, still.
So, either or, I'll just say that. I'll say Lou Thez. If someone listening to this was at the same show and says it was Bruno, please let me know, because I'm sure I'm wrong. Okay, one final question, and then we're going to really dive deep into this. Did you guys ever order any of the WCW pay-per-views?
No.
Okay.
So for me, again, it's a weird situation now because my family owned a bar for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is around the era where I think that there was a thing around called black boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them I remember, but I don't know how many we actually ordered and how many were a black box situation.
Okay.
The ones I remember ordering for sure was, I believe, was 1997 Uncensored. That was, if I'm getting my years right, which I'm pretty sure I am, Team Piper versus Team Hogan versus Team WCW, even though Piper had some WCW guys in there in his team,
Mm-hmm.
aka the Horsemen.
Right.
But, you know, Piper never wanted to be WCW, but he'll use WCW guys. And then the one I'm pretty sure I ordered Hogan Flair. I'm pretty sure that was one that was ordered as well. And even with WWE, whenever it gets hazy with me, like which ones I ordered and which ones was like another kind of situation, basically.
All right. The first show I remember, and we had a little problem because the cable wasn't really working that night, but I got Great American Bash 92 because they had a tournament to crown new tag champions. And I had seen, like, I had recorded, like, the last champions. And that is a phenomenal show if you guys ever look it up on, well, I guess we could say Peacock at this point, because,
Right.
you know, can't say WWE Network, unless you're, you know, out of the United States, which...
That's true.
can.
That and which will make things confusing. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, well...
So which Clash of Champions? I'm sorry, which Clash of Champions was this?
I think this was number 19?
Okay.
And, like, the whole show is, like, tag matches. And there are
Gotcha.
some really good ones on there, too. So, didn't really get to see all of Great American Bash 92. Then I got Bash at the Beach 97 because of the Rodman thing. The first
Yeah.
Rodman match. And then, because I really didn't get a lot of WCW pay-per-views. With pay-per-views, I was mostly WWF, but there was this time where I did get WCW pay-per-views. Like, I got Starrcade 97, Bash at the Beach 98, World War III 98. Don't ask me why, I just wanted to get World War III.
Because it's 3 rings, Bill.
I know, that's probably why. And then the final WCW pay-per-view I got was Starrcade 98, where Nash beat Goldberg for the belt. So, I didn't get a lot.
Oh, I remember seeing it on that DVD.
Like
The Rise and Fall.
I didn't get a lot. I didn't get a lot of WCW pay-per-views, but they had a couple that were good, but not all.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, a lot in the NWO days, I feel like if I'm missing one, that I feel like I might have ordered this one, Fall Brawl 1997, because that seemed like a big deal. Like it was Team NWO versus Team WCW. So yeah, but other than that, it's pretty hazy for me.
Okay. All right.
Rick Steiner has just entered the chat.
Yes, he has. Well, I didn't know Rick had come over.
Maybe he's gonna feud with Chucky from Child's Play again.
Oh God. All right. So now that we've gotten through our experiences as fans and watching WCW, let's get into really sort of the meat of time in WCW, and it involves Eric Bischoff. So the story with Eric Bischoff is he started out in the AWA towards the very end. He was an on-air guy, was an announcer, I think, at one point. So he worked with Vern Gagne until they closed, and then had a tryout with WWF, the famous broom promo, which he doesn't remember happening, which I find kind of funny. And then in 1991, he gets hired by World Championship Wrestling. And he makes his debut at the Great American Bash 1991, one of the worst shows of all time. Not his fault. Not his fault.
What made it one of the worst shows, if you don't mind me? Because I wasn't a fan at that time.
Okay, I've actually seen the show. And this was Flair couldn't, like, Ric Flair and Jim Hurt couldn't come to a contract.
Oh, okay. That was 92. That makes sense. Okay.
And Flair's like, F you, I'm not coming to work for you anymore. I'm leaving.
Right, he still had the belt.
Right, he still had the belt. So, for pretty much the rest of 91 and all of 92, Eric Bischoff was pretty much, you know, an announcer, commentator, reporter, kind of like in the vein of like a Mean Gene, Sean Mooney kind of, you know, position. Then we get to 1993. And 93 is an interesting year because WWF has a down year. Actually, 93, I think, is a down year for wrestling in general. Just my opinion.
And yet that's when I became a fan.
Right. So, Bill Watts, who was the vice president of wrestling operations, he resigned after an interview came out where he used words that really should not be said. So,
Bill Watts.
Yeah. I mean, smart guy, but, you know, didn't really think with words. So, this position is open. Jim Ross is there. Tony Schiavone's there. And it's like, okay, well, probably one of these guys is going to take this job. Eric Bischoff goes for the position and becomes the executive or the vice president of wrestling operations for WCW. Because of this, Jim Ross leaves WCW to go work for Vince. And Bischoff's, you know, it takes a while. Because it's not one of those, he took over and boom, they became a success. It took a while. It was over a year until he got the deal with Hogan. And then Duggan and Savage and, you know, some of the former guys from WWF. And then, in 1995, he has a meeting with Ted Turner, who is a very big part of WCW. And Ted Turner goes to Bischoff and he's like, well, how about I give you a wrestling show on Monday nights? And Eric Bischoff is like, okay, can we have it on TNT? Sure, here, there you go. Thus, Monday Nitro is born. And for about the first 8 months or so, the ratings go back and forth between Nitro and Raw. There are weeks where Nitro wins, and there are weeks where Raw wins. And then we get to June of 96, and that's really the beginning of the WCW taking over as the #1 promotion in the United States. Because Scott Hall comes on the first 2-hour Nitro, where he's like, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And then a few weeks later, Kevin Nash comes on, and then Hulk Hogan becomes heel, NWO. And for 83 weeks, WCW Nitro was beating Raw in the ratings. They had an almost 2-year run as the #1 wrestling program. Then we get into 98, and they're still doing good business. Even though they're not winning every week, they're still doing good business. After 98 is where the downfall begins. Because they lose a bunch of money in 1999. And towards the end of the summer of 1999, Eric Bischoff is relieved of his duties with control over WCW. So, this question This question I'm going to start with Brian, because I'm sure I might come up with another question at some point. Do you think at the time, in 93, Eric Bischoff knew what he was doing when he got control of WCW?
I think I think it's a sort of a hit or miss thing with him.
Okay.
Because I think he had great ideas, and then he had to try to sell them to some of the people, like Harvey Schiller, who was one of the sports people for Turner Broadcast. And fortunately, many of those ideas actually worked. But I think he was so driven to win like TV ratings that he didn't focus on other aspects, like trying to build up new talent, and basically just focus like on the pay-per-view shows. It was all about beating WWF in the TV ratings.
Okay. Jim, I'll go with you. Same question. Do you think Bischoff had an idea of what he was doing in the beginning when he took over?
I think he did. I think, though, he kind of like Brian said, he probably had a lot of, he had to go and talk to the executives and whatnot. So for all we know, he could have had even more ideas that to this day have not been revealed, but they were turned down. And really the only people that know that would have been Eric Bischoff and whoever he had to pitch them to. I guarantee you, whoever they pitched him to does not care at all about anything going on in wrestling.
Right.
So that no one would bother to ask that person either. But I think that's what wound up happening. He threw a lot of things out there, and I do think that when he knew something, when he felt like something was working, he knew how to capitalize on it, as opposed to maybe just like, oh, it's working, but not as much as I want it to work, so I'm going to change gears to try something else. And when I think of back to early Eric Bischoff, I think about, him giving spoilers to Raw, and that was one thing. Is like, I feel like calling out WWE was probably a new thing, because the way he was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that there was he had the idea of, let me throw a lot of stuff out there, and then whatever sticks. So he did and he didn't, which is weird to say, but that's what I got here.
I think the early stages, I think he had an idea. He didn't have a global idea at the time, because I think he might have been restricted because of what WCW was. They were mostly Southern, and we're still going to the local towns. But one thing, and I was thinking about this while you guys were each giving your answers, that I actually think was kind of cool looking back on it, was doing the TV tapings at MGM Studio in Orlando. Because at that time, we're talking early 90s, MGM Studio is an attraction in Orlando at Disney World.
Right.
And, you get a different group of fans come in, watch 45, 60 minutes of wrestling, and then, you bring the next group in. And that was an idea that I actually kind of liked, and they did it for about 4 or 5 years. So that was one of the things that worked. Plus, they didn't have to pay, I was going to
say that too, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've listened to, I don't know if you guys listen at all to 83 Weeks, the Eric Bischoff show. Depending on the topic, I will. I'm a very big, hey, you're going to talk about this wrestler. Don't care. I will skip that show. He also puts out a good point on that, in that when they started running MGM, they were losing money. So they didn't really have to, they had a place that they can go and save money because the old administration was kind of like, well, let's just keep running house shows, even though they weren't making them any money.
Yeah.
So no, the MGM thing was actually very, very huge in terms of cost saving, which is something WCW desperately needed at the time of when Bischoff started.
Right. Okay. So, as I said, towards the end of the summer of '99 is when Eric Bischoff is relieved of his duties. Then, they eventually, towards the end of the year, bring in Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara from Raw to work for WCW, to be head of creative. And we don't see Russo. We hear him at first, and Ed Ferrara becomes the Oklahoma character, which has pissed everybody off at this point, so I'm not going to really bring that up. Then, in about March or April of 2000, Eric Bischoff is brought back. And they have this agreement where Bischoff and Russo are going to be the head of creative. They're going to come up with, they're going to try to save the company. Bischoff only makes it to July. So he's there for 3 months. That's it.
I didn't realize how short it was, to be honest.
I didn't either. I did not either until I did the research. Russo stays on until about the fall of 2000, and then he's gone. Which, by that point, they're back to one of the great or favorite things of WCW, the booking committee. If you've ever seen Jim Cornette's timeline shoots, he talks about the booking committees. It's absolutely crazy. So, at this point, WCW's getting its ass whooped by Raw every week. It's getting its ass whooped by SmackDown every week. Then, in 2000, we have this big deal, and it involves WCW. Because, in 2001, Time Warner and AOL merged together. And
I remember that.
And this is where the whole adventure of WCW really goes into a whirlwind. Because there are some executives in in Turner and AOL who are like, we don't like this product. We don't like wrestling. We don't want WCW on our programs. We don't want it on TBS and TNT anymore. So now, WCW is in a very interesting position. They are on a network that does not want them. They have no leadership, basically. No real control of the company. Eric Bischoff, in January of 2001, makes an offer because he comes together with a group called Fusion Media Ventures, and he tries to buy WCW. He would own WCW. It would continue to run. However, one of the backers of the deal backed out after AOL Time Warner refused to allow WCW to stay on its networks, and basically killed the deal with Fusion. Because if they accept the deal, WCW would still be active. We just don't know where it would be. Now, we get into the final week of WCW. We didn't know it was going to be the final week at the time. Because on March 18th, 2001, they have their final pay-per-view called Greed. It was held in Jacksonville, Florida, had an attendance of over 5,000 people. I've actually seen this show before I go through the card. It's not that bad. I call it decent in the middle kind of show.
Well, look, can I ask you something? And I don't know if you'll know the answer for this though.
Okay.
At this point, do we know who's running or booking WCW? Because I've heard that before too. Like the final shows before the ending of WCW, I've heard people say like it does actually seem like they are making an effort to turn it around.
I want to say like Terry Taylor's involved, John Laurinaitis, maybe Kevin Sullivan's involved.
I was gonna say Sullivan, I think might have been there. I was just curious.
Yeah, I would believe Sullivan would be involved. All right, so here's the card. The final WCW pay-per-view.
I'm actually really excited about this. Go ahead.
Jason Jett defeats Kwee.
All right.
Then we have the finals of perhaps my favorite short-lived championship in the history of wrestling, the WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team titles.
I forgot about those.
Where Kid Romeo and Elix Skipper defeat Billy Kidman and Rey Mysterio to become the first champions.
Oh, they were the first champions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Sean Stasiak with Stacy Keibler defeated Bam Bam Bigelow. Lance Storm.
Poor Bam Bam.
I know.
I don't remember Keibler being with. I mean, I was tuned out at this point. I'm sure.
Yeah.
WCW. I don't remember Sean Stasiak with Keibler at all.
Lance Storm, who I think is an unsung hero of 2000 WCW, and Mike Awesome beat Conan and Hugh Morris.
Okay.
Shane Helms defeats Chavo Guerrero to win the Cruiserweight title. Sean O'Hare and Chuck Palumbo defeat Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell to stay the WCW Tag Champions.
That'd be totally Buff.
Well, they weren't on that night.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Ernest Miller defeated Canyon.
All right.
Poor
Booker
Canyon.
Who better than Canyon?
Yeah.
Booker T defeated Rick Steiner to become the WCW United States Champion.
Hold on. So Rick Steiner held the United States Championship at one point.
Yes.
Okay.
Dusty and Dustin Rhodes defeated Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett in a Kiss My Ass match.
I did read about this.
When Dustin
I
beat Ric
remember
Flair.
that.
However, Flair left the ring, but Dusty Rhodes gave Jeff Jarrett the stink face after the match.
Jeff Jarrett deserves it.
Because, and I actually remember this, watching the show, there's like 2 or 3 segments of Dusty Rhodes eating bean burritos.
Oh God.
Yeah, I love Dusty, but come on. And your main event, and yes, Michael Buffer is still working WCW at this
Well,
time.
good for him. I'm glad about that, actually.
Scott Steiner defeats DDP to stay the WCW World Heavyweight Champion.
Okay.
So not a bad show. Like I said, it's not bad. They got like a couple of good matches.
I do love the fact that they had Buffer till the very end. Because he cost so much money.
Oh my God, it's ridiculous.
Like, you would think he's the first one you cut for that.
I think you and we discussed that, Jim, and I think like
Oh, it's
figured out
ridiculous
he cost,
amount of money.
It's like $500,000.
Something.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
insane.
what it cost. Yeah. Okay, so the next night is a live Nitro and a TV taping. So they are in Gainesville, Florida. Almost at Gainesville, Georgia, which...
Hold on, sorry, Bill, real quick. I just got the Buffer stat here.
Yeah.
So it says, I mean, this is for right now. So
Right.
it said, depending on the match, Buffer earns between $25,000 and $100,000 every time he utters those 5 famous words. On a handful of extremely rare occasions, Buffer has been paid $1
That
million.
much? I can't believe that.
$1 million on a rare occasion. Now, let me ask you this, guys. Do you think a rare occasion would be a WCW pay-per-view main event? Because that's $1 million for every pay-per-view.
I would say yes.
Yeah. It's Unbelievable.
Hey, I mean, when you got pipes like he does, you know.
I could even see Michael Buffer being like, "Nope, it's in my contract that you've told me I have to appear here, and that's why he's still there, or that's why he was there all that whole time."
And then the funniest part about Michael Buffer, before we get back into this,
Yeah.
was the one appearance he did for WWE in 2008.
Yeah.
And he messes up, I don't think he did it on purpose, but he, like, introduces Shawn Michaels as Heartbreak Kid, HBK. Like, the guy's got a name. Hello. Apparently, like, from what I read, he was, like, a jerk to Jerry Lawler, because Lawler was going to take care of him that day, and he was, like, a douchebag to him. That's what I've heard.
What does he mean, take care of him? What does that
Well,
mean?
like, if he needed, like, anything, you
Oh,
know.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So to Gainesville, Georgia, or Florida. This is where we find out that Monday Nitro is going to have next week a season finale episode of Nitro. That is what it's called, is a season finale episode.
To be fair, nowadays WWE does that apparently.
They do, but at the time...
We don't know what that is right yet at that time.
But in 2001, that's actually not a bad idea, because you don't know what's going to happen with WCW. And this is where we find out that Scott Steiner and Booker T will face off in a champion versus champion title for title match.
Right.
Which we will get to a little later. So here's what happened on Nitro. Here are the matches. Jason Jett defeated Disco Inferno. Shane Helms defeated Billy Kidman. Bam Bam Bigelow got his win back from Shawn Stasiak. Canyon defeated Am I Smooth.
Okay.
Rick Steiner defeated Conan by disqualification.
Where's Rick Steiner's U.S. title rematch? What happened to that?
Oh. The featured match on Nitro, a non-title match, Lance Storm and Mike Awesome beat Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo. So you'd figure, okay, well, Storm and Awesome are going to get a title shot.
Right.
And then the final segment of that Nitro, and as soon as I read the notes, I remembered this segment. Dusty Rhodes brings out a bull, and it has Flair and Jarrett written on the bull's ass, and they have them kiss its ass.
Here's what I'm concerned about, though.
Again.
You said that there were 5 matches or 6 matches. How many matches were there?
6 matches.
Isn't Nitro at this point 3 hours long?
I think they went back to 2 hours at
Did they? Oh, see, I don't remember that. Okay, that's
I don't remember when they went back, but they did.
okay.
So, like I said, they also taped the show because they would tape the final episode of WCW Thunder, which would air on March 21st.
Okay.
Jimmy Yang, and Kaz Hayashi defeated AJ Styles and Air Paris.
Alright.
Wonder whatever happened to that AJ guy.
He
I hope he made it all right.
Other things.
Jason Jett pinned Cash.
Well, they're really pushing Jason Jett.
They
That's 3
really
wins in a row.
are. Ernest Miller and Am I Smooth beat Chris Canyon and Road Warrior Animal. Hugh Morris defeated Rick Steiner. We have a 6-man tag match. Shane Helms, Rey Mysterio Jr., and Billy Kidman beat Chavo Guerrero, Kid Romeo, and Elix Skipper. Chuck Palumbo beat Mike Awesome. And in the final match ever on WCW Thunder, Scott Steiner and Jeff Jarrett defeat Dustin Rhodes in a handicap match.
Okay.
That's the last Thunder we ever have. So, we're moving along. You know, week's going smooth. we're a few weeks, we're actually not that far away from WrestleMania. When, on Friday, March the 23rd, 2001, it is announced that Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation bought World Championship Wrestling. And it is the biggest story in the world because it is up on WWF.com where they have WWF purchases WCW. Which is kind of funny, but it's like, oh my god, they actually bought WCW. Oh, go ahead.
I remember that, seeing it on the WWF website, and I was completely shocked. Later on I felt, well, it's the end of any competition, so basically Vince dominated all of wrestling in North America by that point.
Yeah. All right, now let me ask you guys this. Do you guys remember the price?
I don't.
Me neither.
Okay, well, Vince bought, WCW for somewhere in between $2.5 and $3.5 million. That is how much Vince paid to get WCW. And basically, what we later found out was it was for the video library.
Right.
Because they had a big library.
Well, not only that, but they also Turner had said, yeah, we can sell it to you, but you're not going to be on this channel.
Right. Oh, yeah, because this is when WWF's on TNN. The national.
Did they got pop at that time? TNN, we got pop?
I think.
TNN was the Nashville network, which also hosted ECW, ironically.
Right. And I'm actually going to bring up ECW a little later on, because
they're already dead, aren't they?
Right, by this point. Probably by like 6 to 8 weeks, actually. So, it's the talk of the wrestling world. I remember in high school, people were talking about it that Monday, like, WWF bought WCW. Oh my god. So now we go to the quote-unquote season finale of Monday Nitro, where it is held in Panama City, Florida, at the Boardwalk Beach Resort. Because this was their, like, annual spring break episode that they did for years.
Right, sure.
And who do we see to start off Monday Nitro? Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is the first person that we see on the last Nitro. So after that, Ric Flair, who at this time is the quote-unquote president of WCW, gets on the mic, cuts a promo, and says that tonight's main event will be him and Sting for the last time. All right. Here's the show. The first match, Booker T beats Scott Steiner to win the WCW World Heavyweight title. That's your first match.
He's like, yeah, let's just get that world title nonsense out of the way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
We had
Booker T made a better champion than Scott Steiner.
Yeah, he did. We had a triple threat match where the winning team would face the WCW Cruiserweight Tag Champions later in the show. Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman beat Shannon Moore and Evan Courageous and Kaz Hayashi and Yang. So Mysterio and Kidman will wrestle later on the show. Shane Helms defeated Chavo Guerrero to stay the WCW Cruiserweight Champion. Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo defeated Lance Storm and Mike Awesome to stay the WCW Tag Champions. So Okay, Storm and Awesome got their title match. I'm happy. Shawn Stasiak beat Bam Bam Bigelow. The stipulation was if Bigelow won, he would put a tattoo on Shawn Stasiak.
Okay.
Aw, poor Bigelow.
I know. Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman defeat Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo to win the WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team titles, making Mysterio and Kidman the last WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team champions.
What are those belts?
The greatest short-lived championships of all time. And in the main event of Nitro, the last match ever, Sting defeats Ric Flair. Ric Flair wore a shirt for that match. So, during the show, we had backstage segments on Raw's side. William Regal was involved. There was an interview with Michael Cole because, you know, Michael Cole has to get the hard questions.
Right.
After Sting and Flair, we go to Cleveland because that is where Raw is that night. Vince McMahon goes up the steps, enters the ring, and Paul Heyman announces him as the winner of the Monday Night Wars. So, Vince McMahon cuts a promo talking about how he bought his competition. During this promo, he asks the fans who they would like to see come back or come to WWF from WCW. Some of the names that were mentioned include Hulk Hogan, Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell, Booker T, Scott Steiner, Sting, and Goldberg. Goldberg got the biggest applause from the fans, with Bagwell, Booker, and Steiner close behind. I remember the Goldberg cheer. I don't remember the other ones, to be honest.
Right.
So, Vince then says that he has not signed the contract to officially own WCW. He will do it at WrestleMania 17, and he will have Ted Turner himself come to the ring to sign the contract to give Vince World Championship Wrestling. And then we hear No Chance in Hell playing. And there's Shane McMahon. But Shane McMahon's not in Cleveland. He's in Panama City. Ooh. So Shane talks about how they do own WCW. A McMahon owns WCW. But the name reads Shane McMahon. So Shane McMahon now owns WCW. And that ends, really, World Championship Wrestling having a weekly TV show. Now, Jim and Brian, I have in my hand an imaginary check for $1 bajillion.
Okay.
Okay. $1
I
billion.
will-
Indeed.
I will give one of you this check if you can tell me what aired after Nitro. And I will give you a clue. I will give you a clue, and you get one guess each.
All right.
It is a horror movie.
I was going to say
This.
it's a movie, and I was like, oh, maybe they'll give you the win. It's a horror movie, okay. One of the Halloweens.
Okay, that's your guess. Brian?
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Both good guesses, but I get to keep the $1 bajillion.
Okay.
It was Carrie.
Oh.
You know what? I would have been really mad at myself if you would have said that it's like Bride of Chucky, since I mentioned it earlier.
Oh, that would have been hilarious if that had aired. For some reason, I remember that Carrie was going to air after Nitro. And I guess it's because the first time I saw the ending, it scared the shit out of me. Spoiler alert, Carrie pulls her arm, or takes her arm from the grave and grabs this teenager's hand.
There's more than one Carrie, though, right?
Right, but this was the original movie.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
The one with Sissy Spacek and
Yeah.
It was made in it's like 1977.
Yeah, like 76, 77. Good movie, actually.
By the way, quick update on something from earlier. So TNN did not get the pop slogan, I think, till 2001.
Oh, okay.
It's might be, but maybe not really. I don't know. It's a close call.
Okay. So, there's actually some interesting notes that I didn't realize while getting ready for this.
Sorry.
On March 28th, the final WCW staff meeting... Oh, this is from the history of WWE.com, by the way. I want to give them credit for this. The final WCW staff meeting was held at the power plant. During the meeting, 120 of the 140 employee workforce were terminated on the spot and asked to clear out their offices and leave anything belonging to Time Warner behind.
They had to have known that was coming.
That would suck.
Yeah.
Once they read that headline, WWE buys WCW, they were like, probably 90% chance that I'm going to be finishing this job in the next week, at some point, maybe even today.
Now, we've all thought for years that Nitro, the last Nitro, which I forgot to tell you the nickname of that episode was called Night of Champions,
Right.
was the last thing that ever aired. Well, it's actually wrong.
Oh.
Because on the weekend of March 31st and April 1st, 2001, we have the final episode of WCW Worldwide.
Okay.
It is hosted by Mike Tenay and Scott Hudson. Here's the highlights of the show. They include highlights of Greed. They feature an ad for the WCW MasterCard featuring Buff Bagwell.
All right. That signed me up for that.
They had an Ask WCW segment with Tony Schiavone where he states his favorite wrestler to interview was Larry Zbyszko.
Oh.
Schiavone then laughing.
So everything is basically, they're all asking memory questions, I would assume, right?
I think so.
Or someone like, someone loves, when's DDP coming back on Nitro? Hey, go ahead. What other questions were asked?
Well, that's really the highlight of that segment, was that. They have a real, REEL, Time Wrestling flashback, with the match being Buff Bagwell versus DDP from Sold Out 2000.
What a random match.
Why?
Yeah, let's
I
go
thought they
back
would pick
to...
something else, something with more significance than Buff Bagwell.
And you can't say this because, you need to know one of their histories for an upcoming match, because there is no upcoming match.
Right. And they include a look back at the War Games from Fall Brawl 1994. So at least they go a little bit back.
All right.
I think I remember that match. I've seen it.
Was that the one where the man shocks the world? Oh, no, that was 93. That was 93.
This was...
The Hulkamaniacs?
No. Dustin Rhodes, Dusty Rhodes, and
right.
the Nasty Boys against this dream team of Arn Anderson, Terry Funk, Bunkhouse Buck, and Colonel Robert Parker.
This is the one where supposedly he shits his pants.
Yes.
Okay. And also the one where doesn't Dusty go to recruit the Nasty Boys in like a bar or something like that?
Yes. What memories. What great memories we have.
Right.
So
I've seen that match on the Blu-ray of War Games, and
is that
I was shocked by that match.
who falls through like the middle of the two rings? Is it Arn or Terry? I don't
I
remember.
think it might have been Arn.
Yeah, because I remember seeing that. I'm like, holy crap! How the hell does he get back
Right.
up there? So then, after all that, Scott Hudson has the final words of WCW ever. And he says, and this wraps up WCW Worldwide. Not just for this week, but forever and a day. WCW gone. Worldwide gone. We want to thank you for joining us each and every week here on WCW Worldwide. What a great crew we've had. It's been a lot of fun taping these shows, and you can see we have a really good time. For Mike Tenay, I'm Scott Hudson. We'll see you down the road somewhere else.
One of them would.
Yeah. And that is how WCW comes to an end.
So can I make a quick observation here about something I noticed from you reviewing the last week of WCW?
Besides Jason Jett, yes.
Well, oh my God, whoever was booking these shows was all about Jason Jett, and you know it wasn't McMahon because he never came to WWE.
Right.
So, where was everybody? Like, I get that the whole, they're still under contract with Time Warner and WWE didn't want to buy them out. But now that we've reviewed the week before, where was Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Diamond Dallas Page? You know what I'm saying? Like, all these guys are supposed, where's Goldberg? As much as I'm glad to not see him, where is he?
And Sting, don't forget Sting.
Well, but Sting appeared in the final Nitro. These people,
true.
So I'm talking about people that weren't on any of those shows.
I thought you were talking about after everything where all the wrestlers went to and such.
I mean, wasn't Bret Hart and Roddy Piper probably still technically contracted to WCW?
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay, with Goldberg, I could tell you with Goldberg, he had this angle where he had to try to basically reduplicate the streak.
Right, I remember that. Okay.
And when he lost his next match, his career, quote unquote, was over. So I think that may have happened a few months prior to the sale.
Okay.
So that'll be my guess with Goldberg.
Oh, wait, no, hold on. No, I think I might have figured out the Goldberg one. I don't think did he do something stupid with the Sarge?
Yes!
That might be what it is. And I feel like it was sold
Oh yeah,
out
Sarge,
that year.
whatever his Sarge Pittman or whatever the heck his name is.
Right.
Sold out. I'm looking under sold out. This I guess would be 2001. I assume it was a sold out 2001.
Let me see.
So okay, but that answers him. But what about everybody else I named?
Let's see.
Oh no, I guess not. There wasn't a sold out 2001.
Okay, I found Kevin Nash.
All right, so he just didn't want to wake up, or he just didn't want to leave his house?
He lost a match to Scott Steiner at Super Brawl in a 2 out of 3 falls count anywhere, no disqualification, loser leaves town match.
Okay.
Try saying that.
That's a mouthful.
Okay.
As far as Scott Hall, I have no idea.
Probably, to be fair, probably alcohol issues.
Right.
I'm not saying it to be funny, but that's something that played a lot in this period. Kevin Nash, too lazy, kind of.
Yeah. Brad, I want to say he's still dealing from the concussion.
Yeah, but I remember him coming in at, maybe I'm again not putting my people in the right timeline. I could have swore he did something with Lance Storm as part of Team Canada at some point.
Then Hogan, I'm trying to think. I think Hogan was just like, screw this shit. I'm not coming back.
This doesn't work for me, brother. I'm coming to work. Yeah, I mean, I guess if we really do it that way, but as a company that, I guess my question here is why couldn't, and maybe they didn't want to do it, maybe this is part of it. When WWE bought WCW, clearly you can see that they were part of the booking for the final one.
Yeah.
Why not have some of these guys come back on here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you have forced them to come back on here theoretically?
For one last appearance.
But I guess it was such, you know what, on the other hand,
Yeah.
it was such a short timetable this all happened too.
Oh, I forgot to mention, there was one other match that was supposed to happen on Nitro, but did not happen.
Oh, God, who's this?
Shane Douglas against Rick Steiner.
Wow, okay.
Wow.
Well, we know where Shane Douglas stood after all this.
Exactly. Okay. Just to briefly go through a couple things.
Sure.
For those that have short-term memory, WCW would be used in the summer of 2001 for the invasion angle.
I remember that.
It would go to Survivor Series 91 or 91. Yes, they went backwards to Survivor Series 91.
That would have been better than what they wound up doing.
That would have been awesome. No, the feud ended at Survivor Series 2001. And then in July of 2002, and actually I have to say one of the best shocking moments ever, Eric Bischoff appears on Raw and is named the general manager of Raw. And of course, because I think, Jim, I've talked to you about this. Brian, I don't think you've heard this story, so get ready to laugh.
Very well.
When they used to do WWE Countdown on the network, there was an episode, I think it was like the top 10 Raw moments. And Bischoff being on there, debuting was one of the top 10 at this time, which makes sense. It's a shocking moment. Stephanie McMahon has this quote of, when Eric Bischoff debuted on Raw and shook my dad's hand, that's when I knew we won the war.
Oh my God.
You know what, though? In fairness, sometimes I wonder if WWE wants to just do things to, like, remind themselves, by the way, guys, we won the war. I mean, the perfect example is that Monday Night Wars series. My God, I don't know if I've ever seen a documentary series so slanted, maybe in my entire life.
And then, let's not forget about John Cena's quote. He's like, when the History Channel does its special on greatest war blunders,
Oh my God.
They'll mention Eric Bischoff and saying Mick Foley wins the title on Raw.
What is wrong with him? What is wrong with that man?
Hey, the worst moment of his life was when the New England Patriots blew the perfect season. God.
Where's all the social media hashtags for John Cena for white privilege? Hey, and he's one of the guys they took one of his things out apparently on Peacock.
Yeah. At least he didn't say it.
That's true. That's true.
All right.
That's don't get me started on Peacock. I was going to get it, but when I hear all the stuff they were taking off, I just said no, never mind.
The thing with Vince, I can understand. WrestleMania 6, I'm still trying to figure out in my head.
Yeah, I mean, they could have just put a disclaimer in the beginning and just say like this contains attitudes or behaviors that do not reflect the change of our times. Discretion has been viewer discretion is advised, and just leave it at that. I mean, Disney Plus does that to
the Muppet Show.
Right. They actually did it to Swiss Family Robinson, I believe, but I think that's for the children. If you have a viewer that's under
right, yeah, because that's what people were telling me. They're like, "What do you think about Dumbo being not there anymore?" And I'm like, "No, he's still there.
Yeah,
it's
he's
just
still there.
he's under. It's just not under the kids section. Start parenting better."
Yeah. and you're just like, that. I think.
Here's the thing, and honestly, this is going to be a real quick here, but going into, I'm going to be recording WWE free. Actually, while we're recording this, it's only a day away or so. But that's probably one of the things we're bringing up, and I'm actually coinciding that with video games and the recent announcement of the PlayStation Store closing, on the debate on maybe you should have kept physical copies of things.
Yep.
Anyway, back to WCW. It's dead.
Wait.
Right.
PlayStation Network's closing? The store
The
down?
PlayStation 3 and the older generations, but still, if you bought a
I
game
have
on there,
PlayStation
you're
4,
done.
dude.
But some people still have that PlayStation 3, and their games are gone now. If they had backwards capability, and then they could still play it. But they don't.
Good thing I sold my copy.
Even Rick Steiner agreed.
Please don't let me be in the same category with agreeing with Rick Scott. Is it Scott or Rick?
I was talking about your dog, Brian.
Maisie.
Yeah, I know. I know who it is.
Playing on the covers.
So, all right. Now let's get to the serious topic at hand.
We're talking about death. It's very serious.
I was, you know what? I'll probably join you for WWE Free. I'll make my argument about one of the Disney movies. I'll save it for then.
Okay.
All right. So, it has been 20 years since WCW closed. This question has been asked 1,000 times over. And I think the answer has changed over the years. I'm going to start with Jim for this one, because I'm going to have him go second for the last topic that I have.
Okay.
In your opinion, who or what do you blame for the death of WCW?
So look, the obvious person is the person that signed off on the sale. And I mean, I know that this guy named Jamie Kellner had something to do with it, but I don't know if Jamie Kellner was the one that officially his name is on. I think it's a he, is on the document, or if it had to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I don't think, other than that, I don't think you can really point to one suspect. I think it's a variety of a couple things, and I wrote down a few things that I think that could be considered accomplices here. So, and I think everyone got turned away from WCW for different reasons, and I'll go into some of mine in a second here. So, some people, maybe it was Vince Russo and his trash TV style that was more of WWE light. Some might say it's the lack of new stars that would chase Chris Jericho and a Chris Benoit out to WWE, and they would become stars there. Or what about the fact that they could not get out of the NWO concept? How many NWOs at the end of the day were there? There was NWO regular, NWO black and white, NWO Wolfpack, NWO 2000, and then I feel like there was another one.
We had the Latino World Order.
Yes, we had the Latino World Order.
As much as I liked that, it's still in that mix.
But and all of those, it's not like they tried all of those within a span of 5 months. This was years, and they couldn't get away from it. So much the fact that they started naming all their pay-per-views at one point WCW/NWO.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were like, well, if the NWO name is not on there, then people aren't going to buy it. I think another thing that can be pointed to is censorship from the top. So later in WCW's life, even though it's probably wrong for them to probably play WWE Light to begin with, they couldn't even play WWE Light because some people were saying, you can't say this, you can't do that. So I'm not saying that them being able to say words like ass or show women in bra and panties would have given them the win, but they I do think there's certain aspects that probably hurt them, in that some executive that doesn't watch wrestling's like, no, you can't do that. And then, of course, the AOL Time Warner itself. That's, in general, another accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, all those could be... Look, it's not... Today's wrestling, any promotion doesn't even have the audience that WCW had on their lowest days here. Or on their last days, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think all of these accomplices, they could have probably survived. It's just, at that time, there were network executives gunning for that network to not have wrestling, which amazed me when AEW announced that they were on TNT, because I was like, wow, don't these people remember how much money they lost on WCW?
Yeah.
Very true.
And
It was very surprising.
But again, it's a different time with everything going to streaming. Now these networks are just looking for one win, because with things like Disney Plus and HBO Max and whatnot, people are going there at this point. So the standard has been much lowered in 2021 for things on actual television. And unfortunately for WCW, in 2001, there was a much higher standard for ratings at that time. And that is my concluding argument, I suppose.
All right. That's actually a very good argument. Okay, Brian, same question. Who or what do you blame, in your opinion, for the death of WCW?
Well, I think I would blame a lot of it on, like Jim Boy said, there's a lot of different factors. You have the executives, these executives of Turner Broadcast that didn't want it, WCW in their portfolio, so to speak. And you had changing booking committee, as well as the number of older stars like Hogan and Nash and Hall, who basically had so much creative control, they pretty much stifle any progress going towards like the end of the 20th century, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had also a lot of new talent and like mid upper card guys, like as you said, Jericho. I guess I would put Paul the Big Show, Giant White in that midst too, and Dean Malenko. And they want to go beyond being like a television champion to being, or in the United States champion, to be world champion.
Right.
But there was that great control, a lot of favoritism. So they went to WWF instead.
Mm-hmm.
And you also had a lot of the changing times, a lot of the as WCW went on, it just basically all those factors basically made everybody start questioning. I'll bring up one point. When they bring back Hogan, well, a couple points. One of them was the finger point of doom. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
I only saw it on the WCW DVD that was released by WWF, and when they actually see it, being as a person who never saw but heard of it, and you're just like, why? And then they try to bring in another guy like Vince Russo, who did a lot of the Attitude Era for WWF, but you're just basically copying the Attitude Era when it's the Attitude Era starting. The Attitude Era of wrestling was already on a decline at that point. So I agree with Jim Boy. That's a lot of those factors.
Okay. Before I get into my thing, I do want to mention real quick with ECW. Vince, in 2003, reportedly paid $2.5 million plus legal costs for star contracts for ECW. So he paid as much or a little bit more for ECW than he did WCW.
Wow, I don't think I knew that.
So I just wanted to bring that up. And by the way, I'll just answer this question. Who's to blame for the death of ECW? The deal with TNN. That's the answer. The Nashville Network. That's my opinion.
I can see that.
I mean, I do blame Heyman a little bit for first off, like basically starting a war with them in the first episode.
That's true. That's very true. Okay. But back to this question. There's a lot of contributing factors. I think, for me, to say that Eric Bischoff is the single definitive reason why WCW no longer exists is such a BS excuse nowadays. Because when you look back at some of the things he did, he actually did good things. Like we mentioned, Disney MGM earlier. Another thing that he did, which is still a staple to this day, is the monthly pay-per-views. And, depending on how you go, if you think it's a good idea or a bad idea, he's the one that really pushed for a monthly pay-per-view. So, I say Bischoff, while he doesn't get a complete pass, he gets a pass because he's not the main reason for the death of WCW.
Yeah.
Something that we brought up that I didn't think about until talking about it, and I think this is kind of a blame, is the WCW power plant. I'm not saying it's the main reason, but when you have a power, or, like a training, a school, and you're trying to make the next great wrestler, you're not supposed to make it drill military camp every day to the point where at the end there's like one person left and then this next group comes and then like all of them leave. So I think that's a little bit of a blame, but not the big blame. Someone that we mentioned briefly earlier on that does deserve a little bit of blame is Jim Herd. And I'll tell you why. Because when he is brought in 89 and 90, he has little to no wrestling experience whatsoever. All the wrestling experience he ever had was running a weekly TV show on a local channel in St. Louis. And when you have a situation where you basically have Ric Flair, your biggest star, walk out on you, there's a problem. When you want to try to change his character, that's a problem. The one thing I will say in defense of Jim Herd is he did try to push some of the young talent. The Steiner brothers are a perfect example of that. But Herd is a little bit of the blame. And yes, the Time Warner merger, like for a while, I thought that was the reason. I really thought it did. But when I think back on it, and this is going to surprise people for what I'm going to say, and I'm going to defend what I'm going to say here. I think, ultimately, the end of the day, what killed WCW was their spending. And what I mean by that is I'm going back to when Jim Crockett had the territory. When it was, like 605, TBS, World Championship Wrestling. They made a huge profit in 1987. at the height of Hulkamania and WWF and WrestleMania 3 happening, Jim Crockett Promotions had one of the most financially successful years ever. Instead of saving the money, they spent it on stuff they didn't need. And what eventually happened is it took WCW like 10 years to finally make a profit. So if you're going to blame someone or something for the death of WCW, it's their inability to save money. That is what killed WCW. It's not Eric Bischoff. It's not Jim Herd. It's not Jim Crockett, bless his soul. It's this whole kind of stigma of we have to spend. When they should have saved. If they had saved more than they had spent, maybe WCW is still here today. Maybe. But again, the 80s, the decadence, and then you go into the 90s, and that is what I think ultimately killed World Championship Wrestling, was their inability, the whole company, to save money. That's what it was.
I would like to bring up another thought in regards to this, if I may.
Go right ahead.
So I mentioned, because I'm sure someone out there is like, oh, he said Jamie Kellner. That's like, or the person that just signed the document. So that's like kind of an easy way out. It's really this one. Well, let me pose this one to people out there. What about if it's Vince McMahon himself? Now I know what you're thinking. Obviously, he's the one that WWE bought WCW. But think about this. There was clearly Shane McMahon buys WCW. There was a plan. They blew it. They did what every other promoter that handled WCW would eventually do. They blew WCW. Now, had they actually wanted to succeed, which, to be honest with you, I don't think they wanted to succeed. There's lots of proof that they didn't want it to succeed. We could be seeing right now WWE on one day and WCW on another day. So really, after he bought it, he had a chance to keep WCW alive. Vince McMahon, I think, can also be argued for killing WCW in a different way than people might think.
I agree with that, actually. It's a very good argument.
And there's further proof of him not wanting things to succeed when he relaunched ECW as well, which is a similar story, I would say.
Yeah. Now, I will make this argument before we get to the final topic. When you get into the dark, there ends up being a light. And the light, in my opinion, and you guys can agree or disagree, not going to hurt my feelings, we ended up with the golden age of independent wrestling. Because WCW went out of business, WWF was the only game in town. And there were people that are like, I don't think this is as good as it used to be. CZW, IWA Mid-South, and this is over a number of years. Ring of Honor, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, Chikara, Jersey All Pro, Maryland Championship Wrestling, NWA Wildside, and then eventually TNA. At first it was independent, but then it became its own thing. Because of the death of WCW, these smaller promotions went into the spotlight, and we were able to see new talent, young talent, fresh talent that for the most part succeeded and ended up making it in a major wrestling promotion. So really, where we had the death of WCW, we also had, for about a 5, maybe 6 year period, the golden age of independent pro wrestling. And look at the stars that it had. CM Punk, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Colt Cabana, I'm trying to think, Chris Sabin, just to Samoa Joe, Low Key, American Dragon, to name a few. If the
Briscoes.
if the death hadn't happened, I don't think we have the golden age of independent wrestling.
You're right. I can see both WWE and WCW signing some of these guys and really not getting the most out of them and just putting them to the side. And they're just Heat and Velocity and worldwide guys. I can definitely see that.
Right. And if I forgot to mention your favorite independent wrestler, I apologize. There just are 1,000 of them that ended up being successful. Okay, so now we're going to go to our final topic. And I'm going to start with Brian because I know Jim's feelings on this.
Yeah.
I don't even have to ask him,
right.
But we will get to him in a minute. Last week, it was announced that Eric Bischoff would be going into the WWE Hall of Fame, the class of 2021. Your initial thought when you heard he was going in, what your overall feeling is, and the legacy you think of Eric Bischoff in wrestling in general.
Okay, well, I was generally, I wouldn't say surprised, but just oh, well, he's going in. That's good. And because I thought he would go, he would be, since he helped create the NWO, he would have been part of that, but that's a whole different story for another time.
Right.
And I would say his legacy is that he basically helped WCW turn WCW around for much of the mid to late 90s to be a viable competitor with WWF, because by the by the end of the 80s, WWF was the only gig around. WCW was in the far rear view I can't talk tonight.
Rear view mirror.
Thank you. And I would say that's part of his legacy. I mean, he did work with AWA, but he came in AWA as it was going downhill. So that doesn't that doesn't count.
Right.
So I think that's his legacy.
Okay. Now, like I said, I know Jim's first response,
right?
But I have to give you the same question, that I just gave Brian.
Sure. No, obviously, my first response is that the WWE Hall of Fame doesn't mean anything at all. There are no credentials or pre-qualifications at all. And also, apparently, as we're learning this year, you can just fucking move people just for no reason. So, anyway, so whatever. Look, to me, it seems like maybe this was a situation because, as I mentioned, someone's moved. Batista was moved, so they're like, "Oh, we need someone to put in his place." And then part of the conspiracy theory in me is like, "Oh, they can keep showing how WWE destroyed WCW, and we know how much they love that." Right. Whatever. Like I said, it's not, to me, it's like whatever. I just hate that people actually think this Hall of Fame actually means anything. The one thing I am surprised about Bischoff accepting, because they fucked him over, what was it, a year and a half ago?
Exactly, yeah.
They made him move his family from one side of the country to the other, and then he was done in 6 months and had to move his entire family back. If that was me and I got the call, it's one thing if this was 5 years after that, but the fact that it wasn't that long ago, I was like, man, if it was me, I'd be like, fuck you. I'm not going into your stupid ass Hall of Fame. Yeah. So that's the aspect that I am surprised about. But it's only because of that situation. Look, as far as Eric Bischoff's legacy, he did a lot of good in pro wrestling, even though WWE probably won't admit half of it. One thing I count on them not addressing at all is that Eric Bischoff, in my opinion, one of the biggest contributions he had was the emergence of guaranteed contracts.
Yep.
which wasn't really seen for the most part at that time. You know, like you mentioned, he brought WCW up to a level where not only was it competing with WWE, it surpassed it, and even when they were losing, at least it felt like for a while WCW was still trying to get that win back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about this back then. Think about like how ballsy it was just to go against an established wrestling program on Monday night and compare it to literally this week where Impact Wrestling just moved from Tuesday to Thursday so that they wouldn't compete. No, I want these wrestling promotions today to have some balls. I want, and that's something, unfortunately, I don't like. Bischoff did it, he succeeded, and I don't know if we're going to ever be at a point where someone does that. I think if AEW can stay on Wednesday, and get the numbers they are, they're just going to, be happy with that for the most part. There's no drive anymore. Bischoff, I think, I would say, outside of obviously Vince McMahon going against all the territories in the 80s, is the epitome of drive. And Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman was a big guy too in regards to that. And he definitely did some bad, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it was good though too. And a lot of it changed the wrestling world for the better. And even if we go with just his WWE stuff, he probably made the second best authority figure outside of Vince McMahon himself in WWE. And he started the authority figure thing.
He did. Thank you.
Before
to bring that up,
he did start the authority figure thing because he was doing it before McMahon. Except that McMahon popularized it because he was the actual owner, and Bischoff, we all knew that really Ted Turner was the owner of WCW.
The best way for me to describe the Bischoff and Vince thing, Bischoff created the idea, Vince perfected it.
Yeah.
That's okay. For me, I was a little surprised, only because he'd been on AEW like a couple times recently. My second thought was, wow, the class of 2021 is already better than 2020 just based on him and Molly Holly alone.
They did add Kane and Great Khali, which
they added a lot of people this past week.
Did they add the Great Khali? Because I'm confused by that. Because I had done my thing where, if I say like, such and such is not the Hall of Fame, I give the default. This is your yearly reminder. WWE Hall of Fame doesn't mean anything. And the Great Khali was not on the WWE's thing. Where are we getting this from?
I've heard this.
It's not, but see, WWE's in social media announced Molly, Bischoff, and Kane.
Right.
I've at least, unless they added it like in the last 8 hours, I haven't seen anything from the.
And I've also heard Rob Van Dam as well.
I mean, I've also heard the Bella twins, and so I don't even know.
Bella's would have been for 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, then I'm sorry, I'm confused. Because that's what happens when you actually decide I'm going to merge 2 years together.
Right.
Who does that? Like, did the Baseball Hall of Fame do that? I don't think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame did that.
They had a vote, and nobody got the numbers for 2021.
Okay, well, at least there's a vote. I mean, that's already more than WWE Hall of Fame.
So it's just going to be the class of 2020. So anyway, with Eric Bischoff, I also was happy because he got the shaft for not being included in the NWO group getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. Nothing against the 4 men, Hogan, Hall, Nash, and Six going in, but Bischoff needed to be in that group.
I forgot how much it didn't make sense that Six was part of it and Eric Bischoff was not.
Right. And again, nothing against those 4 guys.
Hey, Bill, how about this? Why don't they just do Eric Bischoff 2-time Hall of Famer? Because that happens for no reason.
I'm fine with that.
That could work.
It happened. I mean, it couldn't because being a 2-time Hall of Famer is dumb. That whole aspect of, like, you're in the same profession. How are you in twice? But
Well, wait until Ric Flair goes in for a third time with
oh, I
Evolution.
believe that. I believe. Trust me, I believe that.
Uh, but anyway, with Eric Bischoff, I think overall what we have discussed and we've agreed upon in the last hour and 40 minutes is he did do good. He did some things that ended up being good, not only for WCW, but also for pro wrestling. Eric Bischoff will probably forever be known as the guy who came the closest to closing Vince McMahon and World Wrestling Federation, Entertainment, whatever you want to call it. And I agree with what Jim said. Eric Bischoff had the drive to go for it. And he didn't care who he had to step over to get it done. And, you know, he had this unlimited checkbook from Ted Turner, who I think will be in a Hall of Fame someday. I think he'll be in the Observer Hall of Fame more than the WWE Hall of Fame.
I mean, at least there's a voting system there.
Exactly. With Eric Bischoff, I think the legacy for him is one of he started at the bottom, made his way to the top, stayed at the top for a significant amount of time, came back down, but then came back up when he went to WWE. And I think there is the legacy of Eric Bischoff in pro wrestling. Is he the most popular guy? No, he's not. But is he one of the ballsiest people ever? Yes. 1,000 times yes. If you were to make a Mount Rushmore of the most ballsiest people in wrestling, Eric Bischoff has to be on that Mount Rushmore. That is his legacy. All right. Well, that's going to do it on that note. I hope you guys enjoyed a trip down memory lane 20 years after the death of WCW. Jim, why don't you plug some of your stuff, because I know we got a lot coming up.
Oh my God, this is between doing this and then WWE Free coming out, just a little preview. I mean, you would think we're gonna do a WrestleMania. I don't know which one yet as I usually don't know till the day of. But here's some of the topics I tentatively have. But outside of this, since it's probably the last WWE Free, I'm also we're going to take an hour to talk specifically about this year's WrestleMania. And then the final hour is dedicated to, like, what's, since I'm kind of moving away from wrestling and doing Bill Learns Kingdom Hearts, what would bring me back into wrestling, what would have to happen, not generally for one promotion, but for all of them. Just kind of like, and then also we're going to discuss, like, what would or wouldn't make us watch this year's WrestleMania. And then some of the non-wrestling topics I'd like to bring up: Godzilla versus Kong. I have Justice League, how it's unfair to compare the two. Even though I watched neither of them, by the way. Come on, 4 fucking hours. Who's doing that? Not me. I'll tell you that much. And again, I don't know if all these will get touched on. I mean, I have Chrissy Teigen leaving social media and discussing, like, how much lies in general might be better without social media. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the need for maybe it's not such a bad idea to keep all your physical editions of things between WWE Network and PlayStation 3 store and all that stuff being down. So it's a lot. It's going to be a big show. And then, of course, Bill, we have WWE Free coming this Sunday. Bill, are you ready to visit Disney World?
I am ready.
I'm going to Disney World.
I'm going to Disney World.
And you get to learn about Donald Duck being possibly the most powerful mage in all of the Square Enix universe. Yeah, so that's Sunday. Me and Bill. It's episode 1. It's titled Pilot, and yeah, it'll be weekly, and there's 13 episodes. You can find me on That's Podcast and That's Podcasting on Instagram and Twitter.
All right. Brian, anything that you'd like to plug?
Okay, well, I have a fantasy wrestling league called Hybrid Classic Wrestling. You can find it on Facebook, and I post videos of some of the matches. This month is HCW versus the World, where the originals of HCW take on the best that World Wrestling has to offer, from legendary wrestling stars in their prime to the likes of AEW and CCW.
All right, very good. For me, I'm just going to mention real quick, probably by the time you guys are listening to this, a new episode of Sharks Pond, a South Park podcast, is up. I start the Imagination Land trilogy, so that'll be pretty fun. You even get to hear me sing a little bit on that one. Follow the show on Twitter at Wrestling Show 11. Actually, I do want to mention real quick, we have a famous wrestling reporter following us on Twitter on Wrestling Show, or at Wrestling Show 11.
Really?
Yes. Hold on, let me pull them up. Chris Van Vliet following us now, so that's pretty cool. And also, while I'm looking at it, gonna plug the autobiography of wrestling as Lance Von Erich, Lance by Chance. So you want to check that out, lancebychance.com. You can buy that book on pretty much anywhere that sells books nowadays. Join the Facebook group, that Wrestling Show fan group. You type that in the search bar, you're right there. If you can't find it, it's okay. I put the link in the description for each and every episode. And if you like what you heard here, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/thatwrestlingshow. You get amazing content for the best value for your dollar. We have 3 tiers, $1, $2, and $3. The $3 tier gets you exclusive pay-per-view reviews within 24 hours after the show has ended. So if you like what you heard here, check it out, patreon.com/thatwrestlingshow for a monthly pledge. You could do as little as $1. You could do more than $3 if you want. All right. Well, next week, talked about the WWE Hall of Fame, and since they actually have a class, I will be discussing the class of 2021, give my overall grade as far as this class goes this year, and I could tell you right now, it's probably going to get a better grade than last year's. I'm just going to tell you right now. Well, thank you all for listening. I want to thank Jim Boy Star and Brian for coming on to reminisce about World Championship Wrestling and its final days. And I just want to say to anyone and everyone who ever worked in World Championship Wrestling, thank you for what you did to give us plenty of entertaining moments that we remember still to this day. And, well, we wish WCW in a way was still here. Thank you guys for tuning into That Wrestling Show. I'll talk to you all next time.